The first sign that something was wrong was the gate. I came home one Tuesday afternoon and found a brand new metal gate blocking the private driveway that led to my house. I stopped my truck and stared at it. I had never installed that gate, and I certainly hadn't given anyone permission to put it there. Then I noticed a small sign attached to it. Private access, HOA use only. I almost laughed. The driveway wasn't HOA property. It belonged to my parcel. At least, that's what my deed had always said. But apparently, someone had decided that wasn't important anymore. I got out of my truck and walked toward the gate. That's when I saw the HOA president standing on the other side. Her name was Karen. She was wearing a red blazer, holding a clipboard, and looking at me like I was the one who had done something wrong. "You can't drive through here anymore," she said. I looked at the gate, then at her. "Why?" "Because this is now a community access road." I shook my head. "No, it isn't." Karen smiled. "The HOA has records." I asked her to show me. She held up a folder. "We've already established that this road is part of the association's access system." I told her I had owned the property for years. The driveway had been there long before the neighborhood expanded. My family had used it. The previous owner had used it. And every property document I had ever seen showed it as part of my parcel. Karen didn't seem concerned. "You're going to have to use the other entrance." I looked behind me. There was no other entrance. My driveway was the only practical vehicle access to the house. That's when I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. Someone had deliberately blocked my property. I called the county office the next morning. The clerk checked my parcel number. Then she told me something interesting. "There's an access dispute associated with your property." I asked what that meant. She explained that someone had recently submitted documents concerning an access route. I asked who submitted them. She couldn't discuss everything over phone, but she recommended that I obtain certified copies of my property records. So I did, and that's when the story changed. I received the original deed, then the recorded survey, then the subdivision plat, then the easement records. I spread everything across my kitchen table. For hours, I compared the documents, and eventually I found it. The driveway was clearly shown within my property boundaries. There was an easement, but it wasn't what Karen had claimed. The easement gave limited access for specific purposes. It did not transfer ownership of the driveway to the HOA. It didn't give them unlimited control. And it certainly didn't authorize them to install a gate and block the property owner. I called a property attorney and showed him the records. He studied them carefully. Then he looked at me and said, "This is much different from what the HOA is claiming." He pointed toward the survey. "The land is yours." Then he pointed toward the easement. "They may have certain access rights, but that doesn't mean they own your driveway." That distinction was everything. The next morning, I sent the HOA a formal notice. I included copies of the relevant records. I requested that they remove the gate and stop representing the driveway as HOA property. Karen responded within hours. She said the HOA had reviewed the matter and disagreed with my interpretation. She also warned me that removing the gate myself could result in penalties, so I didn't touch it. Instead, I went back to the county. I requested certified copies of the original records and asked for the complete chain of title. What I found next surprised even my attorney. The HOA's current map didn't match the county's recorded survey. The driveway had been shaded as community property on the HOA map, but the official survey showed it inside my parcel. Someone had essentially treated an internal HOA map like it was a deed. It wasn't, and now we had the proof. A meeting was scheduled. Karen arrived with several HOA representatives. I arrived with my attorney and a folder containing the certified records. Karen began by repeating the same argument. The driveway has always been treated as an HOA access road. My attorney calmly replied, "That's not the same as ownership." He placed the certified survey on the table. Then he placed the deed beside it. Then the recorded easement. The room became quiet. One board member leaned forward. "Wait, the driveway is actually inside his parcel." My attorney nodded. "Yes." Karen immediately tried to change the subject. She said the HOA still had rights to use the road. My attorney agreed. "Limited rights, yes. Ownership, no." That was the moment the entire argument collapsed. The board couldn't simply vote to take someone's land. They couldn't turn an HOA map into a property deed. And they couldn't use a neighborhood rule to erase a recorded boundary. Within days, the HOA agreed to remove the gate. But I wanted everything documented. So the removal was scheduled with county records attached to the agreement. The following week, workers arrived. They removed the metal gate. They took down the HOA sign. And for the first time in weeks, my driveway was open again. I drove my truck all the way to my house. It felt strangely satisfying. Not because I had won an argument, but because the official records had finally been allowed to speak for themselves. Karen never admitted that she was wrong. She simply stopped claiming the driveway belonged to the HOA. The neighborhood eventually received a clarification explaining that the association had access rights but did not own the driveway. And I kept every certified document in a secure folder because that experience taught me something I'll never forget. When someone says they own part of your property, don't rely on what they say. Don't rely on neighborhood maps. Don't rely on old rumors. And definitely don't assume that an HOA sign makes something legal. Go back to the source. Find the deed. Check the survey. Read the easement. Look at the recorded property records. Because sometimes the difference between losing your property and keeping it isn't who argues the loudest. It's one line on an official document. And in my case, that one line changed everything. The HOA thought they had taken over my driveway, but the property records proved otherwise. And once the records were on the table, the gate didn't stand a chance. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from.